Hi friends, my name is Dasha and welcome to my June wrap-up, aka my first video on my channel. I'm really excited to start this. I've been wanting to start one for months now, but it's just scary to start. So I'm starting. I had a fairly good reading month and I read a lot of books that are kind of indicative of what I generally read. So hopefully this will give you kind of an idea of what I typically read and let you know if you wanna, subscribe or just even talk to me. I'm fine if you just want to talk to me. And without further ado, let's get into it. So I read 6 books this month and I had 1 DNF. Average of about a 4-star rating. I had a pretty good reading month. I read 2,456 pages, not counting the DNF. I'm gonna go from worst to best, but the ones at the top are all fairly solid and the ranking changes all the time. So my DNF was Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft. This is a adult fantasy following this man who goes on a honeymoon with his wife, and he ends up going to this famed Tower of Babel like structure, and every single level on the tower has different sights and different attractions, and it sounded super interesting. I borrowed it from the library on ebook, and I'm glad I did because I DNF'd it 15% of the way in. I just hated the main character. I found him intensely unpleasant. He was just one of those people I wanted nothing to do with. I hate this trope that I've seen several times in books, most notably in Red Rising by Pierce Brown, where the main character, the male main character, marries a woman who is so much more interesting than him and just so much more of a personality and so much more fun. So there would be instances in Senlin Ascends where the main character would just kind of be like sullen and the wife would be like playful and like making jokes and he'd be like super serious all the time, and I just find that such an unpleasant trope to read about. It's just such a shame because the concept was so interesting, but the writing just didn't lend itself and the character work didn't lend itself well to that concept, and it's just disappointing because I wanted to like it, but I'm glad I didn't buy it at least. That's, gotta be positive. Next book is Gilded Wolves by Roshani Chokshi. This is a very popular young adult fantasy that was going around last year and it had some really mixed reviews. I borrowed it from the library on ebook and I ended up giving it a 3 stars on Goodreads, but about 3.5 stars in reality based on my rating system, which is Cawpile. If you don't know, it's characters, atmosphere, writing, plot, intrigue, and enjoyment. I will link, I got this from G from Book Row, so I'll link her video down below if you're interested in finding out kind of what that system entails. But when I don't know how to rate books, this is a great way for me to kind of figure out what I really think. So I had some things I really, really loved and some things I kind of really didn't like. And I'm thinking of doing a full review on this book, so I kind of won't go too into detail. This book is about a group of teens, late teens, who are part of this underground world that deals with ancient relics, that deals with kind of recuperating artifacts from different civilizations and, selling them to the highest bidder. And this group of teens is very interested in getting those artifacts back from the civilizations from which they were stolen and plundered, and kind of, reclaiming them and giving them back to their rightful owners. And it basically is a heist story. It's kind of a lot to explain the minute details of it, but it's a heist story and like a good friend group. The characters were phenomenal. I really liked the friend group. I really felt that they were good friends, and I felt like there was a very good balance in everyone's personality, and the relationships are really good, the dialogue was really good. The atmosphere was also one of my favorite things about this book. Set in 1890s Paris is like just a recipe for perfection, and add the fantasy element into it really adds something special to it. It was very opulent and fantastical. I did not like the writing, and that is the gripe that a lot of people had with it. I really wanted to like it. I did not go into this with the bad reviews in like the back of my mind. I really wanted to like it, and I just found that with the writing, I found myself having to go back and reread paragraphs, and I found myself kind of being very stuck on the action scenes. And I don't typically do well with action scenes anyway. My little pea brain can't process them properly. But I had an even harder time than usual. Her style of writing lends itself very well to the characters, the dialogue, and the atmosphere. I think she did a fantastic job with that. But the action was a little bit confusing. The magic system is something else I really just want to touch on. Although it is explained in like black and white, you know, forging deals with two types of, I think it's the matter and the mind, I still felt as though it seemed too open-ended for me. It felt like literally anything was possible to create, and I don't really like that for my magic systems. I like there to be a lot of constraints. That just wasn't my favorite. But I think this book has fantastic characters and atmosphere, so I do still think if you're considering it, you should definitely give it a try. I think it is pretty solid, and I would read the sequel. The next book on my list is Dead Mountain, The Untold Story of the Dyatlov Pass Incident by Donnie Eichar. I gave this a 4.5 stars because it is a solid piece of nonfiction. So I read this on Scribd as an ebook, and it is the basically the story of an author kind of piecing together what happened to the Dyatlov group. If you don't know, it is a very famous unsolved mystery that I think actually just got solved. Officially anyways, the case is now closed, but it's a group of hikers that went into the mountains in Russia, and they kind of were never heard from again. And when the group was discovered by the rescue team, they were in like very weird positions. They were not wearing shoes despite it being the dead of winter in Russia. And there's a lot of like mystery surrounding it and conspiracy theories. So this author specifically goes to Russia a couple times and documents that, and also intersperses that with the group's lead up, so their trek to the mountains, as well as the rescue mission / body recovery, I guess, and the investigation that followed. So that format lent itself very well to kind of being compulsively readable, because first you're following the group's trek through the mountains, and then you're following the group's discovery and the investigation that followed. And right when that gets good, you switch to the author's point of view, where he's in Russia interviewing like family members or people who knew them. And while that's not the most interesting part, it was pretty smart of him because it made the book very readable, which is nice. I blew through it very quickly. I also love that he very much humanized the victims. He kind of reminded us that they were real people, they had personalities, and they had, you know, their own characters, and they were loved by family members and by a lot of people. So I thought that was really well done, very respectful. And he also proposes at the end a possible, I guess, solution to the mystery. He basically goes through and does a bunch of research and kind of eliminates all the possibilities, and he said, I think this is what happened, and he gives a basically moment-by-moment account of the hikers' last moments. And I thought it was really, really sad, but it was also really, really well done. You can tell there was a lot of research and care that went into it, and I would absolutely recommend this if you love any kind of internet mysteries or unsolved mysteries. The next book I read and loved is Blitzed by Norman Ohler. This is about the drug use in the Third Reich, which is a very juicy topic, might I add. So I gave this about a 4.5 stars. I thought this was so well researched, so readable, so fascinating. It accounts for the drug use in the Third Reich during World War II. I really enjoyed that it was very readable. It followed a linear timeline, so it started with the end of the Weimar Republic, into the beginnings of the war. It talked about how drugs impacted the Blitzkrieg and the invasion of Poland and all that super interesting stuff. I also like that it was very readable if you don't know that much about World War II, because it does explain what happened, but it doesn't make it so draining if you already do know about World War II, which I do, but it wasn't like I had to like rehash all these things I already knew. Anyways, super well done. It is a little biased. You can tell that the author's research kind of influenced how he viewed certain events. I don't think it's fair to claim that most of the major events during World War II were influenced by Hitler's drug use. I think that's a very tall claim to make, and it kind of is one the author hints at very often. but it's obviously clear that A, this is his area of research. Of course, he's going to be a little bit biased towards it. And B, it was insightful into Hitler's psyche and what he was feeling and thinking and how he was dealing with what was happening. So at the end of the day, I think it did lend itself to an interesting perspective on some of the major effects of the war. Additionally, there were some super interesting facts at the beginning about German drug use and manufacturing, about the use of methamphetamines, cocaine, like all these things that we could not even imagine at this point. But Germany at some point was the largest manufacturer of, I think it was cocaine and methamphetamine in the world, and they exported like most of it, and it was just this massive industry. And finally, I love that the author pokes fun at the Nazi ideology of like perfection of the body and the mind, superimposed with the rampant drug abuse at all levels of the army and the population. And it's just such an interesting read, super fascinating. Even if you don't know that much about World War II, I would really recommend that everyone pick this up. The next book I finished was Uzumaki by Junji Ito. This is a horror manga about a town that is infected with spirals, and that is all I will say. I gave this 4.5 stars. This was absolutely unsettling, extremely horrifying. The art style in this is super creepy. I also love that this is kind of it's not a very linear story, it's more of like a bunch of little vignettes and short stories about the town and about the main character, and you just kind of follow her throughout, you know, a bunch of really weird situations as the evidence of this spiral starts piling up. Man, if you like horror at all, I just gotta show you, like, even like the end page. Look how fucking creepy that is. It's so good. I will say the end dragged a bit once the story became actually a little more linear. At some of the beginning was a little bit scarier and a little more interesting, but I will say the most horrific thing about the end is the feeling of like despair, hopelessness. That shit still is terrifying. So anyways, it was gross at times, like my jaw was hanging open. I've never read anything like this, and I absolutely would pick up more of his work. My next read was World War Z by Max Brooks. This is the story of the zombie war told in a series of interviews from individuals all over the world from all walks of life, and I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, technically 4.5, probably 4.75. I absolutely love this. I thought it was so well done. The amount of research that clearly went into this was absolutely astounding, because the military maneuvers and the kind of different things that he would have to know about different parts of the world were really well defined, and I really appreciated that. Especially like the military tactics and the way things were described were just so well done, so detailed, that at certain times I literally was like, oh my god, and I was like, this did not happen, this is not real, don't panic, this is not a thing. But I literally had to like stop myself at times and be like, oh shit, that's terrifying. I was like, no, that didn't happen. You're good. I also really appreciated that it followed a bunch of different people from across the world and different situations. So, you know, like a doctor from China at the beginning, and then it also followed like military people from the US and Ukraine, I think, and or Russia. And it also followed just some like regular ass people that were just trying to deal with this and how they kind of dealt with certain situations. I thought the interview format really lent itself well to the story that the author was trying to tell. I felt that it was very human and very emotional, despite the fact that it's supposed to be a horror slash, you know, sci-fi about zombies. I felt that it was still fairly relatable, and it was kind of beautiful in a way. I thought that it was really, like I said, like very human. It was very nice to be able to connect to these people despite the situation that they're going through is nothing that, you know, we're dealing with. But it was still very, I don't know, I have so many good things to say about this book, but I can't put them into words. I just think if you're at all interested in any kind of sci-fi or, you know, dystopians, I really think everyone should pick this up. And the final book on my list is Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin, the adult fantasy following the end of the world with a fantastical twist. I gave this 4.75 stars. I loved it. we love N.K. Jemisin in this house. She just does something so special. So I guess if you want like a little better synopsis, you start off following this woman whose son just got killed, and then her daughter is missing along with her husband, and she's kind of trekking across this earth that's falling basically to shit. The planet they live on is constantly shifting. The tectonic plates are very active, and they kind of have to deal with what they call seasons, when the earth just kind of completely explodes around them and just goes to garbage, and humans kind of have to adapt. So they're dealing with this current season, and it's like the worst one they've had yet. And again, not saying much more than that, even that was probably too much. It's just so good to go into this book not knowing that much, because it just absolutely blows you away. A lot of people complain about the second point of view. So at some point you do read from a character's point of view that goes, you walk over to the table. And a lot of people complained about it because they thought it wasn't necessary. I also agree that I don't think it was necessary. I don't think it added anything to the story, but I thought it was really well done and I had no issues with it. The pacing was a little off. So I tried reading this book before on ebook and I wasn't able to like really get into it, but I think that mostly had to do with, again, pacing and the fact that I was on ebook. I don't really love reading adult fantasy on ebooks. I find it a lot easier to grasp it and kind of just follow along with it. So I'm glad I was able to find this physically for dirt cheap, Valley Village. Yeah, the pacing was just a little touch off, but I don't think it was so severe that, you know, it ruined my enjoyment of the book. I think about this book all the time after having finished it. I went and bought the sequel, Obelisk Gate, before I even finished it, and I was just like, I'm into it, I'm here for it, I'm excited to read how it ends. I thought that the format that it was written, because you follow technically 3 perspectives, the format that it was written in really lent itself to making you care for the characters, and obviously that's what you want when you're following someone across 3 books. So everything about this is fantastic. N.K. Jemisin is just really a master in words. I have no other way to describe her. She just does such a phenomenal job. Something really special. She has something really special, and I definitely recommend this book to any fantasy lover if you have not gotten on it. I know it's gotten quite a bit of love on BookTube, but if you have not gotten to it, I really, really think that you should. So that's it for my June wrap-up. Like I said, I might have full reviews coming for a couple of the books, so keep an eye out for that. I also have all my socials linked. Please come talk to me. I am super excited to finally join this online book community and talk about books with everyone. It's just super exciting, terrifying, but exciting. So that's it for me, and I'll see you guys hopefully soon. Bye.